This is the one that I personally find really frustrating. When are we going to have a Shakespeare of our own, James?
What's so frustrating about that?
Well, I feel like the fact that we've been talking for a while about the fact that we're writers and that this is what we do, and I think the question asking, and of course it goes back to we have a little bit of a folk story connected, I think, to President Kimball, but it goes back further, doesn't it, to
So Orson F. Whitney
Orson
said
of Whitney.
this in the late 19th century. Someday we'll have Miltons and Shakespeare's of our own. Nobody reads Milton anymore, so they
No,
remember Shakespeare, even though Milton's great.
Milton is
Um,
great.
but they remember the Shakespeare part, and then Kimball in the 70s kind of repeated that and brought it
Well,
back. Yeah.
I think the thing that's frustrating to me about this question is like, when are we going to have a Shakespeare of our own? I That's an affront to someone who works really hard and has been working in the arts for a long time. And it's basically saying, because Shakespeare is Shakespeare, and yes, okay, on the one level, Shakespeare is eternal because Shakespeare somehow got in a little bit of a time capsule and 500 years later, and part of it is that he's a fantastic writer. He's an excellent dramatist, and he was very, very prolific. So we have like almost 30 plays, potentially more than 30 plays that he wrote. And we still know them and study them now. But I think the reason that he was so prolific was that he was a working writer, he was a working artist, he was a working actor at a time like that was his job. He went and did it every day, and the audience came and they laughed at those fairies and they cried when, those silly teenagers um, were, doing all sorts of silly things and killing themselves and falling in love overnight, all of these silly things. And there's great tragedy and also really fantastic comedy. There's a wealth of stories in his stuff, and we still study it now. But the thing is, my point is that he was a working writer. He was I like that you said a little bit ago, that used the word journeyman. Um, he was able to perfect his craft and he was able to work on it. It wasn't a hobby, it's what he was doing, it's how he made his living. And there are a lot of us doing that now.
Yep.
And the world is a lot bigger than it was 500
Yep.
years ago. And there are a lot more people to try to get into the globe, but there
Yep.
are also a lot more distractions
Yep.
that prevent
Yeah.
people from
No, I
being
think
there.
Eric
So,
Samuelson wrote a piece once called, I think it was called Mormon Drama, Whither Mormon Drama or Whither. He played with the two, whither like where are you going, or whither
yeah,
like
whether, yeah,
dry up. But basically, in that, he says, you want a Mormon Shakespeare, build a Mormon globe, right? If you have the
right.
Globe Theater, if you have the people coming and we need the groundlings and we need
Hmm.
the people where this is a fancy thing for them, right? All layers of audience like that, the audience helps, right?
Right.
Um, and then Therick Jepson, who's the Iriantum editor, has said part of it is, are we willing to, we read Shakespeare with this intensity,
Hmm.
right? And we're willing to invest. So not just do we have a place for somebody to go develop and practice and have occasion
Hmm.
to write, do we have readership that's willing to like think so hard about literature that it's worth having this depth and that kind of stuff. So
Right.
that's part of how you build it up. The other thing I would say about this question that comes up all the freaking time, and
All the
some
freaking
people
time.
who say, well, oh, we just can't. But yeah, to
There
your
is no
point, like
Mormon
there are
literature.
more Latter-day Saints now than there were people in Britain in Shakespeare's time. More
Right.
active Latter-day Saints, right?
Right.
Or at least about as many. I'm not
Uh-huh.
up on my demographics to be precise, but I know it's roughly like that. Um, when people ask that question, there's two things they may be talking about. One is a Shakespeare quality depth of experience. Are there
Hmm.
people like really using language? Are there people hitting those like emotional depths that you get sometimes in Shakespeare? And my
Hmm.
answer to that is like, yeah, we got them. Check.
Yeah.
You can have a Shakespeare level aesthetic experience with at least passages of the work that already exists.
Hmm.
And like if you've had a great literary experience that like lifts you out of yourself and breaks your heart, that's what Nicole always says when you have a new play.
Oh,
It's like there's a new Mel play. Am I ready for my heart to be shattered again?
yeah. And I'm
Right?
like, here's my new hammer. I'm ready to do it.
Here's the
Yeah.
new hammer. Like, what more can you ask for than that? Relatively rating, like this is a
Yeah.
9.5 or a 9.7 on the shatter scale. Like, sure, but also who cares, right?
hmm
I think part of what people are asking for is when are we going to have somebody that famous, right?
I think that's actually what the question is asking. I think that's what
Yep.
it means. And that's also upsetting.
And people are assuming that we're going to have that because somebody with a calling, right?
hmm
Somebody who was a church leader said it
Yeah.
aspirationally, and they want to shortcut it as prophecy without the labor, right? Of a
Yeah.
communion. And there's a couple things I think about that. One
hmm
is Shakespeare is Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare as a writer.
Right.
He has the global stature he does partly because he was the biggest writer at the time the English beat the Spanish Armada. And
hmm
the English proceeded to build a bunch of boats and go out around the world. And there's plenty of people in the world who learned that Shakespeare was a genius behind the guys who carried bayonets,
Yeah.
right? And
And
if
there were a lot
that,
of families at that time that the only two books they owned in the house were a Bible
a
and the works of
Bible and
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare, right? And that's
hmm
because the nation took him up as a project,
Yep.
and that project, and then the nation took over a lot of the world, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of greatness, I don't want. I wash my hands of it, right? Like I hope a Mormon writer never has the kind of stature that comes from global conquest
Right.
because no, right? And people have made the most of it. And I
hmm
think it's great if you're from India and you love Shakespeare and find something there that's beautiful. And there are lots of people like that,
hmm
but like that's not what we want, right?
Right.
So what we should aspire to is if we focus on the quality and we
hmm
invest in the quality and let that be its own reward. Teach
Yeah.
ourselves to have that depth of experience. That's good. If we're looking for external affirmation through
hmm
literature, that's a trap.
Yeah.
Because the
Well, it's
kind
also
of
not possible.
literature that gets external affirmation is going to be the kind that's on external terms.
Right. Well, it's also not possible to get that to reach that level of fame as Shakespeare. It it came to
And
him
nobody's,
after he was dead. It's all posthumous. Like
yep.
he what well, I brought up him being a working artist at the time because that's how the famous that he was in his lifetime. Like it's not
And
possible for anyone to achieve to become Shakespeare until
no,
like 3 or 400 years later.
that's
And
true.
who knows?
And that said, like we have had in the commercial book world, the Stephanie
hmm
Meyers and Brandon Sandersons have
Shannon
been
Hale,
able to, Shannon Hale,
Brandon Mole,
been
yeah.
able to create experiences for people where
hmm
across national borders and in a globalized economy, like people have found something in each of those works that resonates with them. And we can be proud of that. But
Yeah.
I think what happens is we end up putting an asterisk on it because
hmm
we're like, oh, just normal readers chose them.
Yes.
But we, and that's the New York Times article we were talking about earlier. That's like,
hmm
yes, Mormons can be successful. They can resonate with people in these different genres, but they can't do literary excellence. They're not going to get the awards that we at the New York Times, right? This set of people is giving. And I think
hmm
that's just a totally separate question, right?
Right.
How do people in our community relate to different structures of power? And I think
hmm
as readers and as patrons and as a community, we need to separate the two and
hmm
say, let's tell the stories and by all means let's build readership and stuff, but we can't judge ourselves by a standard of this thing that happened for different historical reasons,
hmm
some of which we don't want.
Right.
You know,
No,
I say
exactly.
this too when people ask about, oh, there's all this great Jewish literature. I'm like, I don't want a Holocaust, right? Because I'm
No.
sure we would produce a lot of stuff digging deep if a similar thing happened to our community.
hmm
And that
No.
that's a price nobody wants to pay, right?